If you were anything like me, you probably look around at the world right now and wonder when the technology we've been promised is actually going to arrive.
Right, yeah, like where's the sci-fi future, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
I mean, we hear constantly about batteries that could charge an electric vehicle in like 5 minutes, or building materials that actually suck carbon out of the air instead of polluting it.
Oh, sure. The headlines are always there.
But then, you look at the supply chain, at the massive just environmental cost of mining the materials we need, and it feels like we are completely stuck.
Yeah, we hit a bottleneck. I mean, the theoretical science is there, but scaling it up using traditional industrial era methods is either way too expensive or just too ecologically destructive.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we have a mission that might just unstick that bottleneck for you.
It's a really fascinating one, too.
It really is. We are exploring a blueprint that could completely revolutionize our global tech supply chain and, honestly, our climate strategy.
Yeah.
And it is coming from the most unexpected place imaginable.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have guessed this one.
Right. It's coming from the discarded, chopped-off branches of Costa Rican coffee plants.
So our roadmap for this comes from two incredibly detailed sources today. First, we are looking at a doctoral thesis in nanotechnology, and that was authored by Costa Rican scientist Martin Gutierrez Guerrero.
Okay.
And alongside that, we are also analyzing a projected impact report from his company, which is called Novi Amazonia.
Which maps out the business side of it, right?
Exactly. It maps out the 5-year commercial and environmental models for actually taking this technology out of the lab and into the real world.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise we're exploring today is transforming agricultural waste, literally just coffee prunings, into something called 3D biogenic graphene.
Right.
And if you care at all about the next generation of smart architecture, or if you just, love a story about the global south completely disrupting traditional extractivist economics, you're going to want to hear this.
Yeah, but before we get into the actual mechanics of how you turn a twig into a high-tech material, we really need to establish a vital epistemological ground rule.
Wait, what ground rule?
Right, I know it sounds heavy, but it's a methodological note that is heavily emphasized in the doctoral thesis itself.
Okay, lay it on us.
So throughout our discussion today, we have to draw a hard line between established physical science, meaning like how these materials theoretically work based on known chemistry, and the design targets or the financial projections that are laid out in the corporate report.
I appreciate that distinction because, a theoretical capability in a beaker isn't the same thing as a commercial product you can buy off a shelf today.
Exactly. I mean, a doctoral tribunal demands that a candidate explicitly separate verifiable hypotheses from confirmed empirical data.
Right, that makes sense.
So when we discuss certain performance metrics like a specific battery charging speed, we are discussing the model's targets under very specific assumptions. Those are goals, not necessarily third-party certified results just yet.
Got it. We are looking at the blueprint of a revolution, so we need to know which walls are already built and which are just, like, drawn on the paper.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So speaking of paper, let's talk about the single biggest frustration in modern materials science. Have you ever tried to separate two pieces of wet paper?
Oh, it is an exercise in futility. They just fuse together and you end up tearing them into, like, paper mache.
Right. Individually, a dry sheet of paper is thin, flexible, incredibly useful. But the second they touch while wet, they stick together into a useless clump. You are basically fighting physics to pull them apart.
And in the tech world, that wet paper is 2D graphene.
Exactly. For over a decade, we've been told graphene is this miracle material. It's carbon isolated to just one atom thick.
Which makes it incredibly conductive.
Superconductive. But it has largely failed to take over the commercial world because of that exact wet paper jam.
Yeah, the phenomenon you are describing is actually called restacking. Traditional 2D graphene is thermodynamically unstable when it's isolated.
Unstable how?
Well, the sheets have this overwhelming tendency to clump back together face to face.
See, I always pictured it like static electricity pulling them together, but what is actually causing that massive attraction at the microscopic level?
So the driver here is van der Waals dispersion forces.
Okay.
The source material notes the interlaminar interaction energy is around 2 electron volts per square nanometer.
Can we get that in English, please?
Yeah. Fair enough. To put that in human terms, at the nanoscale, that is essentially a localized gravitational collapse.
Oh, wow.
Right. The isolated carbon sheets are just thermodynamically driven to snap back into a structure that resembles regular old graphite.
Like the stuff in your pencil.
Exactly like the stuff in your pencil. And they do it with a tiny microscopic spacing of about 0.335 nanometers between the layers.
So we spend millions of dollars and massive amounts of energy to peel carbon down to a single magical layer, and physics just immediately snaps it back into pencil lead.
Pretty much. And that collapse completely ruins the material's theoretical active surface area.
Because it's all clumped up.
Right. An isolated monolayer of graphene boasts a theoretical surface area of around 2,630 square meters per gram.
That is massive.
It is, and that massive surface area is the entire point. That is what gives the material so many active sites to store energy or conduct electricity, but the restacking just destroys that accessibility.
And on top of that, the current methods for making synthetic graphene sound like an absolute environmental nightmare. The sources mention chemical vapor deposition, or CVD, and something called the Hummers method.
Yeah, neither are great. CVD requires massive industrial reactors running at 1,000 degrees Celsius to essentially grow the carbon atom by atom.
1,000 degrees, that's insane.
It takes a lot of energy.
Oh.
And then the Hummers method relies on highly corrosive toxic chemicals like sulfuric acid to aggressively oxidize and separate graphite.
So both methods are environmentally damaging.
Very. And they keep the cost of high-quality graphene upwards of $100 per kilogram.
Okay, so if nature has already solved the clumping problem, why are we trying to build it from scratch? Because this is where the thesis completely flips the script.
It really does.
Instead of trying to force these carbon sheets apart, the proposition is to use the 3D vascular channels, the xylem, that the coffee Arabica plant has already built to move water and nutrients.
Right. The technical term used in the thesis is pre-scaffolding.
Pre-scaffolding,
Oh. The plant has spent its entire biological life organizing cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin into this incredibly complex, interconnected, porous 3D network,
Like a sponge.
like a very rigid sponge. And the proposed technology takes that natural architecture and essentially fossilizes it.
But how do you do that without just incinerating the wood into useless ash?
Yeah.
I mean, if I throw a coffee branch in a fire, I don't get high-tech graphene.
No, you definitely don't. The transformation relies on controlled pyrolysis.
Okay, which is what exactly?
So the biomass goes into an inert nitrogen atmosphere, meaning there is zero oxygen present to cause actual combustion.
So it can't burn.
Exactly. It bakes, but it doesn't burn. From there, it undergoes acid purification and catalytic carbonization.
Wait, does the acid just melt the wood down to a slurry, though?
No, actually, it acts much more like a precision scalpel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the acid targets and strips away the volatile organic components, specifically the hydrogen and oxygen that are locked in the hemicellulose. But it leaves the rigid, carbon-heavy lignin skeleton completely intact.
So it's leaving behind a pure carbon replica of the plant's veins.
Precisely, and that replica brings us right back to your wet paper analogy.
Right.
Because the plant's channels have this natural curvature and what scientists call tortuosity, which is just the twisted, winding nature of the pathways. Those rigid curves act as permanent physical spacers.
Geometry itself prevents the newly formed graphene layers from ever touching face-to-face.
Exactly. The plant's natural anatomy physically solves the restacking problem.
That is wild. You aren't forcing the carbon to stay apart. You've just baked it inside a microscopic mold that holds it open. It's brilliant.
It is a very elegant solution.
But going back to our ground rule, how do we know the carbon actually maintains that high-quality structure and surface area after all that baking in acid?
Right, because you cannot just eyeball a piece of charcoal and call it graphene.
Exactly.
The thesis insists this must be empirically validated using highly specific laboratory techniques. They utilize X-ray diffraction to prove the carbon atoms have arranged themselves into that conductive hexagonal lattice.
Okay, and what else?
Then they use BT isotherms.
Beat isotherms. I'm assuming that it isn't a weather pattern.
No, far from it. It's a gas absorption test.
How does that work?
They flood the material with a specific gas, usually nitrogen, at very low temperatures. By measuring exactly how much gas coats the internal walls of the material, they can mathematically map out every microscopic nook and cranny.
Oh, wow. So they can literally see the surface area.
Exactly. That is how you prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the massive surface area is actually there and hasn't collapsed.
So we have this verified, highly conductive 3D sponge that refuses to collapse. Let's pull back from the microscopic view and look at where this actually lands in your life.
Let's do it.
The first major application listed is in advanced energy storage, specifically batteries.
Right, because those fossilized vascular channels become literal diffusion highways for ions.
I picture compacted synthetic graphite, like navigating a maze of dense city streets with, like, a million stoplights. An ion has to squeeze through all these layers to find a spot to store its charge.
That's a really good analogy.
Thanks. But this biogenic 3D graphene is more like an open, multi-lane superhighway.
That is a perfect visualization of tortuosity. In a conventional battery anode, lithium or sodium ions face a highly tortuous twisted path.
Lots of traffic.
Lots of traffic. But in this biogenic structure, the paths are inherently open and interconnected. The ions can travel from the electrolyte into the active storage sites incredibly fast.
And that speed is what leads to the report claiming this could allow batteries to charge in just 5 minutes.
Yes, that's the claim.
But let me push back here. Is that a reality we are seeing today, or is that a marketing number?
This is exactly where the tribunal assessing this thesis would zero in. The 5-minute charge is a design target.
Okay, a target.
Right. It aligns with the physics of lowering tortuosity, sure, but you cannot claim that metric as a scientific fact based solely on the anode material.
Because a battery is more than just an anode.
Exactly. To prove it, you have to build a complete full-cell battery and subject it to electrochemical impedance spectroscopy.
Sending varying electrical frequencies through the whole battery to measure where the actual resistance is.
Precisely that. You have to measure the resistance of the entire system, the electrolyte, the cathode, the separators, not just the carbon sponge.
Okay, so the 5-minute charge is the goal. But honestly, even if this biogenic graphene only performs as well as the synthetic graphite we use today, the geopolitical implications are still massive.
The geopolitical shift might be the most consequential part of the entire model, to be honest. Currently, high-performance energy storage is chained to conflict minerals like cobalt and nickel.
Which means relying on horrific mining practices, ecological devastation, and incredibly fragile supply chains.
Because those materials are only concentrated in a few specific regions globally.
Right, so bypassing that system is revolutionary.
Absolutely. If you can achieve comparable energy density using carbon derived from agricultural waste, a resource that grows abundantly across the entire global tropics, you replace a finite, geopolitically tense mined resource with a renewable botanical one.
That alone is huge. Let's pivot to the second major industrial application, though, because this one caught me completely off guard.
Concrete, right.
Yes. The report details adding this coffee-derived graphene into structural concrete.
Yeah, this targets a massive, often ignored driver of climate change. The cement industry alone is responsible for roughly 8% of all global human-made carbon emissions.
8% from just pouring concrete, that's staggering.
It's massive.
So how does mixing a tiny amount of carbon sponge into the cement actually help bring that number down?
It functions as a crack bridging mechanism.
Okay, what does that mean?
When concrete cures and dries, microscopic fissures naturally form. It's unavoidable. And over time, physical stress concentrates at the very tips of those microfissures, tearing them open into macroscopic cracks that threaten the structural integrity of the building.
So if you disperse this biogenic graphene into the wet cement, does it act like microscopic rebar?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. The report suggests adding less than 0.1% of this material by mass to the cement paste.
Less than 0.1%, that's almost nothing.
It doesn't take much. Those nanostructures span across the microfissures, intercepting the crack and redistributing the mechanical stress away from the tip.
Wow. And the design target here claims this could increase the mechanical strength of the concrete by up to 30%.
Right.
The math on that is wild. Because if your concrete's 30% stronger, builders can use 30% less cement to achieve the exact same structural integrity for a skyscraper.
And scaling that reduction globally is how the report projects avoiding 12.4 million tons of CO2 emissions.
But, applying our reality check again, I'm assuming claiming a 30% strength increase isn't just something you can guess.
No, you absolutely cannot. It requires rigorous ASTM compression testing.
Which literally means casting standardized cylinders of this new concrete and crushing them at a giant hydraulic press to see when they fail.
Yes. You have to prove under extreme regulated pressure that the graphene disperses evenly inside the cement matrix and doesn't clump together to form weak spots.
Okay, so the end products, the ultra-fast batteries, and the decarbonized concrete are wild. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh yeah, the process itself.
Yes, the manufacturing process itself might be even more interesting than the products because it isn't a dirty industrial factory. The thesis outlines something called a cascading biorefinery.
It's a completely zero-waste loop where they use every single part of the plant.
The efficiency of the model is remarkable.
It is. So before the coffee wood ever enters the pyrolysis reactor to become graphene, the cooperative runs the biomass through a supercritical CO2 extraction process.
Supercritical CO2. That is when you pressurize carbon dioxide until it hits a weird hybrid state where it acts like both a gas and a liquid, right?
Yes, exactly.
Why is that useful here, though?
It acts as an incredibly clean, highly effective solvent. In its supercritical state, the CO2 has the density of a liquid, allowing it to dissolve target compounds.
Okay.
But it retains the diffusivity of a gas, meaning it can penetrate deep into the microscopic pores of the wood.
Well, that is cool.
So they use it to gently extract high-value biochemicals like polyphenols, residual caffeine, and chlorogenic acids without leaving behind any toxic chemical residue.
And those extracts are highly sought after in the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industries.
Yep, they are generating revenue from the wood before they even begin synthesizing the graphene.
But wait, what happens to the batches of graphene that don't quite make the cut? I mean, if you are relying on natural wood, biology isn't perfectly uniform.
That's true.
Some batches won't meet the strict electrical standards for an EV battery, right?
Right. And the batches that lack the necessary purity for high-tech electronics are biologically activated into a material called biochar.
Ah, biochar. I have read a bit about this. It acts as an edaphic amendment, meaning it's essentially a super sponge that improves the health of the soil when you mix it back in.
Exactly. Because it retains that massive 3D surface area, it holds on to incredible amounts of water, which provides a critical buffer during agricultural droughts.
Which we are seeing more and more of.
Right. But even more importantly, it functions as a slow-release matrix for soil nutrients. That dramatically reduces the farmer's reliance on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers.
And getting rid of synthetic nitrogen is a massive win for the climate.
It tackles one of the most potent drivers of global warming. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers are a primary source of nitrous oxide, or N2O, emissions.
And N2O is bad.
Very bad. Nitrous oxide has a global warming potential 273 to 300 times worse than CO2 over a 100-year timeline.
Wow. So replacing those fertilizers with failed graphene mitigates a massive, invisible climate threat.
Exactly. It's a huge secondary benefit.
Now, there was one more detail in the biorefinery loop that felt straight out of a science fiction novel to me.
The sensors.
Yes, the sensors. The sources discussed taking graphene ink and printing biodegradable electronic circuits directly onto the living leaves of the coffee plants.
It is a fascinating application of ultra-localized precision agriculture.
How does that even work?
Well, because the carbon is highly conductive and entirely biocompatible originating from the plant itself, obviously you can print temporary biosensors.
On a living leaf?
On a living leaf. And these circuits monitor hydration levels and detect pathogens in real time, transmitting data back to the farmer.
And at the end of the season, when the leaf inevitably falls off the branch, the sensor doesn't become electronic waste. It just harmlessly melts back into the dirt as carbon.
It's a perfectly closed biological loop.
That is just incredible. But, you know, it naturally leads us to question how this closed loop scales up to disrupt the broader global economy.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's pretty profound.
Let's look at the financial projections in the report. We established earlier that traditional CVD graphene costs over $100 per kilogram.
Yeah.
This biogenic model targets a price point of just $35 per kilogram.
Which is a huge drop. They calculate this based on a yield of 2.5 tons of pruning waste per hectare, running at a 15% conversion rate into graphene.
And the 5-year financial models are substantial. They project $185 million in revenues from the battery sector alone and another $142 million from the concrete additive market.
But the revenue stream that truly fascinated me was the carbon credits.
Oh, totally. The report makes a big point to differentiate between insetting and offsetting.
Right. Let's unpack the flaw with traditional offsetting first.
We see it everywhere.
Mm.
An airline tells you they are carbon neutral because they paid someone not to cut down a forest. But it's abstract.
Very abstract.
How do you actually prove that tree was definitely going to be chopped down? It's really prone to greenwashing.
Insetting is the physical, verifiable alternative to that. So during its natural life, the coffee plant actively absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere through photosynthesis.
like all plants.
So like all plants. If you harvest that wood, convert it into biogenic graphene, and lock it inside the structural concrete of a new skyscraper or the chassis of an electric vehicle, that carbon is physically trapped.
I can't get out.
Right. It cannot decompose and re-enter the atmosphere for well over 300 years.
You aren't just theoretically preventing future emissions. You are physically pulling carbon out of the air and burying it inside our modern infrastructure.
The model targets the physical removal of 2.6 tons of CO2 equivalent for every single ton of biogenic graphene produced.
That's a lot of carbon.
It is. And that generates premium, high-integrity carbon removal credits, which currently hold massive value for institutional ESG investors.
And the socioeconomic impact of this ecosystem is just profound. The report projects creating 12,500 direct jobs and 15,500 indirect jobs.
But it isn't just the sheer number of jobs, it's the geography of those jobs.
Right.
This strikes at the core sociopolitical thesis of the entire project, decentralizing technology and completely flipping the Global South narrative.
Historically, the economic model has been deeply extractivist.
Very much so.
The Global South exports cheap, unrefined raw materials like raw coffee beans or crude mineral ores, and the Global North handles the refinement, manufactures the high-tech product, and retains the massive profit margins.
But under this biorefinery model, the local agricultural cooperatives aren't just selling cheap twigs.
No.
They are operating the refineries themselves. They are synthesizing next-generation nanomaterials in the exact same mountain communities that grew the plants.
They retain the technological sovereignty and the high profit margins.
Exactly.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Sure, go ahead.
We've laid out a system that is high-tech, zero waste, empowers local farmers, and fights climate change. I mean, it sounds like a utopian dream.
It does.
What is the catch? What happens when this hits the messy reality of the real world?
Well, the report is surprisingly transparent about the immense barriers to scaling this.
Okay, like what?
The primary vulnerability is logistical. We are not discussing a massive centralized factory where trains deliver uniform loads of coal.
Right.
This model requires collecting tons of pruning wood from thousands of small, highly dispersed farms situated across difficult mountainous terrain.
Oh, man.
Yeah. If the cooperative's collection network fails, or if local transportation costs spike, that aggressive $35 per kilogram price target completely falls apart.
Navigating a truck up a washed-out dirt road in Costa Rica to pick up a few branches from 100 different family farms is a vastly different logistical challenge than running a standard supply chain.
It's a huge hurdle.
What is the other major hurdle?
Standardization. Heavy industry, whether automotive manufacturing or commercial construction, requires absolute consistency.
Of course.
Every single batch of material they purchase must behave identically.
And biology notoriously refuses to be identical.
Exactly the problem. The biomass of a coffee plant will shift depending on the specific microclimate, the soil chemistry of that particular ridge, and the specific variety of the plant.
So a batch of biogenic graphene, synthesized from wood grown during a severe drought year, might have completely different structural properties than a batch from a remarkably wet year.
Exactly. Ensuring uniformity across all those variables requires incredibly rigorous, expensive quality control at the refinery level.
Because if the purity fluctuates even slightly, heavy industries simply will not adopt the material.
They can't risk it.
So the science is completely sound. But the execution requires this flawless marriage between advanced chemical engineering and incredibly messy, localized agricultural logistics.
It is a monumental challenge, but the potential upside justifies the effort.
It really does. So to synthesize our deep dive today, we started with a molecular paper jam, the frustration of trying to keep 2D graphene from restacking itself into useless pencil lead.
Right.
And the ultimate solution isn't to build a hotter industrial reactor or to invent a more toxic chemical wash.
Right. No, the solution is to borrow the 3D microscopic plumbing that a discarded coffee plant spent years building.
We are utilizing a pre-scaffolded biological structure that paves the way for ultra-fast energy storage, decarbonized cities, and a localized, zero-waste bioeconomy.
It flips the script on the entire global supply chain. The Global South transforms into the manufacturer of the high-tech future rather than just serving as the mine for it.
It's an amazing vision.
It raises a vital question, too, and it's a thought I encourage you to consider after we sign off today.
Let's hear it.
We are deeply conditioned to believe that cutting-edge technology is something that can only be born inside a sterile, billion-dollar laboratory in Silicon Valley.
Sure.
But what if the ultimate blueprint for our post-petroleum economy hasn't been waiting in a lab at all? What if it has actually been hiding in the discarded, overlooked branches of a Costa Rican coffee farm, just waiting for us to zoom in close enough to finally see it?
Sometimes the most advanced engineering on Earth is just nature, waiting for us to catch up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.